Welcome everybody. My name is Marina. I'm part of the PMF team, PMF being Product Management Festival. We are part of the Peak Product organization in Zurich, Switzerland. We are a product management community-based organization. We organize several events, and we also have our advisory services for the community. And today you're here for one of our collaborations with one of our favorite partners, Amplitude. Before we start, I will quickly give you an intro on what we do. As I did mention, we have several initiatives, one of them being our conference in Zurich and Singapore. We run them yearly. We have, Zurich is our biggest one. We have had up to 1,300 attendees. It's a 2-day conference only on product management. This last year, like after the whole COVID roller coaster, we made it to over 800 people from all over the world. We're starting to get there again. We have speakers from big companies, smaller companies, from anywhere. They're all welcome. It's a beautiful event where people get to chat with each other. On the chatting and networking idea, we also have our local PM nights, which are events we organize after work hours throughout the world. They're just informal evenings where PMs can meet. We have ambassadors all over the cities. If you're interested, get in touch with us and we'll let you be one of our ambassadors. We just go to a big company or for example, a bar or something and have a small presentation and then just some chatting and networking time. Informal, but at the same time, it just makes us grow all together. We have our product executive circles, which are invitation only, similar to PM nights, but much smaller groups, more focused on executives and higher positions where they can discuss anything. Whatever happens in the executive circles stays in the executive circles. We then have, if you want to be one of those cool executives, we have our INSEAD Product Management Executive Program, which is a 4-day course we do in France and in San Francisco. We just have amazing tutors teaching how to step from a senior position to a C-level or so in the product world. And then we have our report, not today, not the one we're announcing today, another report on product management, where we just survey as many product management managers as we can throughout the world for a few weeks or months, and then we bring those results together and bring some insights. We are normally known for investigating on leadership and company culture. And finally, what we're here for, webinars. This was a way to be able, for those that cannot travel around the world as much, or for those that, at work, you want to still hear some voices and opinions and different trends, you're welcome to join us and be part of a conversation. And then very quickly, I will just introduce Grace to you. Grace is our senior communication manager in Amplitude. She will be showing you everything, well, some of the brightest highlights of the hottest products of 2022 from their product report. And I will just let her do her thing and hope that everyone enjoys. We will spare some minutes at the end of today's session to have a Q&A with Grace. If you have any questions, please write them on the chat. And at the end of the session, we can go through them. Thank you so much. And Grace, welcome.
Thank you, Marina. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So thank you again, Marina, and hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. So my name is Grace Lynch. I am a senior communications manager at Amplitude. Let me update this screen share really quickly. And so today I am here to talk to you all about the Amplitude 2023 product report. And so let's talk a little bit about what that is as I pull up my slides again. But so the products report, really what it is it is something that we have done now for 2 years. And so where we kind of, got this idea from, is essentially, we have a lot of data at Amplitude. And so this data that we've pulled is what we consider to be revealing trends, industries, and strategies, and other products within the digital landscape. And this includes, as Marina alluded to earlier, the next 30 hottest products around the world, or at least our perspective on those. And I know Marina mentioned I'm a communications manager. I sit within the marketing org here at Amplitude. That probably means that I'm fairly less technical than many folks on this call. And so why do I bring that up? Well, one, our marketing team loves data and we love telling stories with data. So while we're not in the day-to-day of product management of our own tools, we get really excited about the ways that we can take our data and then leverage it to share insights, advice, and just other interesting findings that we are able to get exclusively from our own data. So this is a prime example of that. Today, we will connect this data to outcomes. We'll see how some trends from the outside world have affected product growth over the year. And my hope is that you all walk away with new insights, new ideas, perhaps a new brand that you want to follow. But before I start, I know that some folks are familiar with Amplitude already, but for those of you who aren't, Amplitude is a digital analytics platform, and really our mission is to what you see here on the screen, to help companies build better products. And so, okay, what does that mean? Really, what we aim to do is help teams understand how people are using their products so that they can then deliver a better product experience. And this can mean a bunch of things. It can be telling you what product features are working. It can tell you where your users are getting stuck, or perhaps where they're potentially at risk to churn. And it can also tell you really what actions in the product are leading to the right outcomes or the outcomes that your team is hoping to achieve. These insights, this information, we believe nothing is more critical to revenue growth than being able to action on these insights. So you may be asking, okay, how does this translate to a product report? Well, so the Amplitude platform tracks more than 1 trillion data points every single month from the event data that our customers share with us. So this is obviously a lot of data, and it provides a really expansive view into digital activity and behavioral analytics. We also know, though, that our data set does not span every device, every user, every product around the globe. However, we think that the insights in this report are indicative of larger movements and moments in our growing digital world. So a quick note on the methodology. So I know there's a lot on the screen, but you can just listen to me give the overview. So really a few things. One, we take this is all event data that our customers share with us. And it's really representative across regions, across industries, both of which we'll touch on in a little bit. All the data is anonymized and aggregated. So it's clear that one company is not creating these major spikes that we see. We also have to keep it within a timetable. So the data that you'll see from today is pulled from the beginning of August in 2021 to a year later at the end of August in 2022. A few other things on here are really just places where we want to make sure that the data quality is high. So like I said, we make sure that no one company contributed to more than 5% of the overall trend line. All of the industry analyses had to have at least 20 products in the industry to be included in this report. And then our next hottest products actually had to have a minimum of 10,000 monthly active users, although you will see when we get to that slide that most of them had far, far more than that. So let's talk about the top findings. I think if there's one slide that depicts all of it, it's this one, but we will go deeper into each of these 6 things that you see here during today. But just to take a look at these initial findings. So 16% overall product growth year over year. Our largest percent increase in industry was 118% growth, and that was in HR staffing, job searching, those types of products, which we'll go in a little bit more in depth with. When it comes to major company growth, 4 of our 30 next hottest products saw more than 500% growth in monthly active users, which is pretty impressive. And we'll also talk a little bit about specific industries. So SaaS, crypto, both of these tell stories of industries in uncertain times, a phrase I feel like we've been using a lot. But we do think that the data is telling a bit more of a complicated story than maybe some of the press headlines that we've seen in recent months. And then lastly, we'll take a look at PLG, product-led growth, as a practice and why companies are choosing to leverage that as a tool for long-term and sustainable growth throughout this year of 2023. So these are our key findings, but let's go ahead and dive into that first one around global product growth. So 16% is maybe it's as high of a number as you thought, you thought it would be higher. And I think that that's pretty normal. But what we need to take into account here is in our last year's report, we saw global product growth from 2020 into 2021 was actually 54%. So if you think about the August 2021 baseline, that's 16% on top of that. So it's a pretty impressive increase overall from the start of 2020 to now. And you can see despite some ebbs and flows, it does continue to increase. And so obviously, things that are top of mind are the economy and how, folks that are spending less, does that translate to less usage? And in this case, it's a little hard to tell. I think that this growth is impressive when thinking about things like economic growth. But as we'll see as a bit of a theme throughout, while people may be purchasing less, their usage is still steadily trickling up for those products that they have already purchased or owned. So one other thing to note on this, on LinkedIn, we've had a lot of social shares of this report since we released it in November. And one thing that our readers noted that we actually think is a really great point is that the continual uptick that we see here reinforces that the folks that switched to digital products for many different facets of their life during COVID, we're seeing that sustained here, and in fact is only continuing to increase. So some of those ideas of some digital products having COVID bubbles that were going to burst, we're not actually seeing that that's the case here. When we take a look at digital product growth around the world, we actually see a fairly similar trajectory for all of the 8 companies that we tracked this year. So in Europe, that's the UK, France, and Germany, but we also have looked at Australia, Singapore, Japan, India, and the US as well. So what we're seeing here is that overall digital usage is ticking up steadily, especially through those early autumn months and into the winter. And then when we look at the overall tails, we do see almost every company ticking upwards, which is a very promising sign. And actually Germany, in the case of Europe, Germany saw the highest rates of growth, peaking at about 40% this time last year, and then again peaking through these summer months. France saw a similar thing, albeit at a bit of a slower rate. And then actually UK was the one that showed the most moderate growth for us, peaking at 18.4% in August of 2022. So I know we're a few months removed from last August. And so personally, I'm very excited to see our next year's report, to see where these trajectories land, because there has been a lot of, whether they're global events or industry specific events that have occurred over the past, say, 4 or 5 months that I think would be really, really interesting to show there. So a bit of a teaser for next year if y'all want to stick around for that. But let's talk a little bit about industry growth, because I think there's some really interesting things in here. First, I know we talk a lot about the next hottest products, and we'll certainly get there, but I think it's really important to look at industry growth as well. And the reason is that digital products are not monolithic. Trends that hold true for one industry don't necessarily apply to another. And so that's why this year we chose 12 categories to analyze product growth in. Most of them you'll see today, the rest you can find in the report. But the analysis really paints a different picture for different industries. It captures things like seasonal shifts, social movements, current events. And The one common thread, though, because there often is a common thread, is that digital product usage continues to rise. And so for folks in products, for folks in marketing, that usually is pretty exciting because it presents a lot more opportunities as you build more of a customer base and more users. So let's talk about a slide that we already a bit alluded to, and that's HR staffing and job searching products. So when I say that category, we often call it digital HR, but that's things like job search platforms, people management software, payroll or benefits applications. And this was our standout market this year. This was the biggest surge of growth of any industry we analyzed. And it tells a story, even though it looks like a very up and to the right line, it actually tells a story of a labor market in flux. And this is not going to be new to any of you, but the HR leader and really company leaders in general are in a really challenging time themselves right now. Many sectors are actually still navigating labor shortages. And then, of course, others, it's hard not to see the headlines of reductions in headcount, furloughing, and other things like that. And as unfortunate as those situations are, it's clear that folks are using tools to help them navigate, whether that's giving advice, whether that's helping scale their own team's effort to make sure that the experience for new and potentially departing candidates and colleagues is positive or as positive as it can be. We also see this on the flip side with employees themselves. A lot of folks left their jobs during the Great Resignation, as we call it. But then, a lot of others rushed to find new jobs. And so all of this contributes to this line that is continuing to escalate and potentially, go even further than that 118%. So speaking of those who are gearing up potentially for new roles, the other big industry that we saw that is actually somewhat related to digital HR is this idea of continuing or adult education. So those can be anything from foreign language classes to career coaching, to any tools and products or solutions that really help people upskill. And as you can see here, we saw a big peak right in August at the end of our analysis period, almost 48% year over year increase. So this growth may be due in part to some of the massive shifts in the labor market that we just talked about. But it also shows that, a lot of folks got involved with some form of adult education, continuing education, upskilling programs during COVID, potentially just because they had more free time. And we're seeing that hasn't really dropped off. So similar to what we talked about earlier, language learning apps and upskilling products are continuing to perform very highly, showing that maybe some of these folks that adopted this in COVID times are actually now creating habits, which is exactly what, as product folks, we want people to do. So really interesting stuff here. When we go to some of the B2B categories like SaaS, you can see here that this is some high highs and some low lows. And really what we saw was not a large bump of activity in the fall of 2021, but a massive increase between December 2021 and March 2022. And obviously, what this later in the year tells is that things are leveling off a bit, but still reaching that 25% growth from the August baseline. And when we talk about SaaS, we hear things like SaaS crash, SaaS collapse. This data tells a little bit of a different story, basically thinking that the SaaS collapse may be slightly overblown. But I think that this one will definitely be a chart to watch in our next report as we continue to see tech stocks struggle in this economy. And a similar story, although I do think that this one again will be probably one of the ones to watch next year. We talk a lot about crypto crash too. And so that was something that occurred earlier in 2022. I think we saw, albeit maybe larger bump towards the end of the year. And again, our data tells a less dire story than what is being told outside or maybe in press headlines. So you see kind of some ebbs and flows, and it did peak at 78% in January 22. And while it has somewhat descended down, that's still growth. That's almost 26% growth based on August 2021, if we're using that as our baseline. So Potentially one reason here could suggest that, there has been a decline in crypto values. Maybe that's not necessarily the case for crypto users. So something to definitely keep an eye on for next year. When we look at our travel category, this could be tools for planning vacations, booking flights, arranging ground transportation. And that really also told a very interesting story last year, but it's maybe not the most surprising one. So you can see that around the time that most travel restrictions were lifting, we saw this big surge in the early months of 2022. And people began traveling really for the first time in years. And it also could indicate some people going back to the office and picking back up their commutes using apps that help them in their daily commute, whether that's things like maps or just rideshare services or really anything like that. One thing that's interesting that we did note was that dip in June 2022. And the more we thought about it, the more interesting it was when we paired that to the headlines and saw that around that time, we saw soaring airline prices, a lot of travel snafus, and maybe some things that ended up having folks cancel trips, not leverage the tools. So it's interesting to see how some of these maybe micro events actually cause some macro changes when it comes to product usage. And for our last one on the industry section, let's talk a little bit about health tech. So again, this is something, these could be products like telemedicine, B2C health apps, hospital softwares, and that can continue an upward trajectory over the past year. You see a spike in January and an immediate dip followed by a couple other spikes. And so we thought, what could this be? What could this mean? And so in January, health plans kick in, the new health plans where you're often, if you're like me, you're figuring out what exactly I signed up for. It's also New Year's resolution time, and that folks usually do leverage a lot of digital products to support them as they commit to some new goals. We also think that this graph specifically follows some of the COVID surges, so Omicron in January, and then some of the additional upticks around the globe in spring and late summer. The one main takeaway I would say from this slide, though, is really that we now see how integral digital products have become in healthcare, and it's signaling that really a lot of these products are probably going to outlast the pandemic. And even if they were COVID specific, there's a lot of opportunities for them to pivot to become a lasting tool that people continually come back to. So with that, I want to talk to you all about some of these products that are contributing to these graphs, but are really standalone success stories. This is always a crowd pleaser for our report, and so much so that we expanded it this year. So in our inaugural report last year, we had 20 next hottest products from around the globe, touching every region. This year, we're back with 30. So we did 10 per region, so 10 in Europe, 10 in Asia Pacific, and 10 in North America, which really reflects where the bulk of our customers are. So to compile this list, we focused on companies that were privately held as of June 2021. And like I said earlier, had to have a minimum of 10,000 monthly active users. And then in terms of other just notable callouts, this was by no means a prerequisite to get on this list, but we actually found out that the folks that the companies that you'll see on these next few slides had at least 40% year-over-year growth. Most of them had more than 400,000 monthly active users, and 11 of them had more than 1 million monthly active users. So clearly these folks are doing it right. So let's get into who they are. So these are all of the brands that made the 2022 next hottest products list. My guess is that you're looking at this and you're seeing some that you have heard of, maybe you use in your daily life, and others are probably brand new to you. And that's usually how this list goes. And that's one of the reasons why we find it so valuable. If the past is any indication, these companies will very likely become household names. From our last year's list, at least 3 companies went on to raise more than $100 million in funding rounds, and another one was purchased through an acquisition by Walmart's fintech venture. So a lot of them are doing quite well. And obviously this year, little less VC funding to go around. Folks are being a little bit more careful with how they spend their money, and that's very fair. But interestingly, we found that 3 companies on this list have actually, sorry, 9 companies on the list have secured funding rounds in 2022 already. And then 4 of them, Coho, TravelPerk, ScalaPay, and Quanto, received more than $100 million in 2022 funding. So future is probably bright. I would venture to bet that many of these companies will see funding rounds in 2023, but we'll have to stay tuned for that. Last thing on this slide, we don't claim to have a crystal ball. However, our experience working with a lot of high growth companies has shown us really kind of the recipe to products becoming runaway successes. And really the 2 main ingredients of that recipe are a fine-grained understanding of what makes for an incredible customer experience and remarkable user adoption. So each of the companies that you see here leveraged both to drive massive growth in this past year. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of them. So we'll start with Europe, as many of you all here are based in Europe and are coming from there. So the next hottest products in Europe was a fascinating list for us this year. It spans a gamut of industries. So on the one hand, you'll have SaaS solutions like Pitch, which is based in Berlin. You'll see some buy now, pay later products like ScalaPay in Milan. And there's a lot of fintech apps and services, which actually there's a lot of fintech apps and services throughout the next hottest products list. But in this case, we have Paris-based Quanto and Copenhagen-based Pleo. So another thing that was interesting about this group was that 3 of them were solutions for travel in some capacity. So Tickets, TravelPerk, and Trusted House Sitters, which are based in Amsterdam, Barcelona, and Brighton, UK, respectively. And really, we think it could just be just the beginning for these companies. They've obviously already experienced tremendous growth, which is what puts them on this list. But especially as, most COVID restrictions have been eased, and as really the world is starting to travel again, this is not the last we will see of these brands. The one other one I want to call it is the number 1 highest growth company that is on the next hottest products list for Europe, and that's Paired. So Paired, for those of you who are not familiar, their founders thought there are plenty of relationship apps out there for folks that are single. But there was a gap in the market for couples, and really they were looking for a tool that would help them keep their relationship healthy. So this app is designed to strengthen existing relationships. So that's with research-based questions, quizzes, games, exercises, you name it, this app has it. And apparently they weren't alone in feeling that this app deserved a spot in the market, because Paired grew 636% over the last year. So one of our highest growth percentages, far above 500 and far above the majority of those on this list. So very impressive. Now, there is a chance that you may be thinking, okay, I saw the BeReal logo on the previous slide and it's not here, but the company is based in Europe. To that, I would say you have a great eye, but also you're completely right. And this was an interesting one for us because we have a lot of parameters in place when we cull the data for this report. And so when we see something that has absolutely obscene growth, we have to tap into it and make sure it's accurate and make sure that there's not other external factors that don't accurately describe the user growth. So this was one that took us aback, frankly. And when we dug into it, we realized that the data was completely valid and that BeReal just had unheard of growth. So to put some numbers to it, BeReal grew from 10,000 daily active users to tens of millions daily active users, all within 18 months. So this shows to us that BeReal shouldn't be considered a next hottest product. BeReal is the next hottest product. And what we love about BeReal here at Amplitude is their data is a central part of their culture. Almost every one of their employees uses Amplitude, and their founder and CEO shared that he spends several hours in Amplitude every day. For fundraising, they show a dashboard instead of a standard pitch deck. So all of their Amplitude widgets and numbers are there and for easy access. And it shows really how engaging his product is by showing this usage numbers. So really, when you think about it, with a great idea, a focus on customer experience, and a data-centric culture, BeReal, in a way, has achieved the unreal. So shout out to their team. Really excited to see what comes next in the new year. When we talk about the other regions, a couple of things to note on APAC. We had a lot, like I said, a lot of fintech companies here. So OKCoin, Slice, WageTap, and WeMoney are some of those top Asia Pacific focused fintech applications. Interestingly, though, fintech did not take the top spot on the APAC list. Instead, that was Style App On The Look, which saw even higher growth than paired with 690% year over year. For those who have been to Seoul, this is probably no surprise. It's one of the great style capitals of the world. And this app allows any user to discover the latest in K-fashion and even actually buy their finds on the spot. So it seems like fans can't get enough of this social shopping app, and it's actually becoming the leader in a now flourishing fashion app category. And then lastly, with North America, this year's North America list reflected two main themes that really kind of run throughout this year's report. So the first is the resilience of the SaaS industry. And the second is the burgeoning growth of health tech and wellness categories. And actually 9 of these 10 that you see here fall into one of those categories, including our top 2 picks, which is an AI-powered planning tool, Motion, and a weight loss app that is very popular right now called Found. Both companies, maybe unsurprising to this group, are based in San Francisco, California. And so one thing as we were talking to these companies and trying to get that secret sauce of really what is driving this exponential growth, and they really said that that's all good and well, but they're really focused on efficient long-term growth. And in fact, when we spoke to Motion's CEO, he shared the following: in economic downturn, growth efficiency matters more than pure growth rate. And it is clear that the venture market is no longer rewarding growth at all costs. For us at Motion, we unlock further growth by investing in our product. This is something that we really hear from a lot of folks, and we're excited about the opportunities that it presents a lot of companies. He went on to give us the example. They put all of their company resources into developing a team version of their product early in 2022, and that paid off huge for them. A lot of teams are now using Motion as their only project management tool. And for those of us who work with project management tools, we know there's plenty on the market. And this has really unlocked a lucrative product-led growth motion for them. So these quotes from Harry and other leaders are embedded throughout the report. And, the more we spoke to folks that were included in the report, the more we wanted to hear from others about how they're tackling growth in 2023. So from B2B to consumer tech to media, the current economy has companies taking a critical look at their strategies for driving growth. And that's really one of the main takeaways of the survey that we included at the end of our product report this year. So we talked to about 200 product and growth professionals, most of whom are in a senior role. And although they cited a variety of concerns, when it came to identifying the best bets for building their business, their answer was essentially the same, and that was product. So what's top of mind for them today? Well, a likely reflection of a very competitive market. A majority of respondents expressed concerns over both attracting new customers and losing existing ones. So 58% worry about an increase in churn, and 55% fear fewer leads, signups, and conversions. So one thing I like about this is that it's really not just specific to product, but is really specific to the holistic customer journey. Obviously, product plays a key role here, but this is things like marketing and sales and customer success. And so taking a holistic look at the customer lifetime is really, really important here in giving folks more confidence in being able to combat churn and drive folks in when maybe they have less to spend with. One consumer tech marketer observed to us that users just seem more likely than ever to churn to a competitor if the product does not meet their needs. And that's not totally surprising, and it's probably reflects some of what you've heard in the market too. But it is something that is definitely top of mind for most leaders, and getting a better idea on how to reduce that churn is definitely a priority for 2023. Our respondents also pointed to how the downturn and this current economy has really kind of upended their plans. And they're questioning to themselves how quickly they can adjust. So 26% said that they're concerned about a loss of product strategy focus, and 25% are concerned about not pivoting fast enough. A majority are dubious they have the resources to respond to the downturn at all, with 63% feeling moderately or less equipped to shift product strategy, and just 37% feeling really confident about that. So one leader in the quick service restaurant or QSR space shared with us that lacking the necessary foresight to know where to put our eggs makes us extremely dependent on reacting speedily to shifts in consumption behavior. We are not a, quote, quick pivot company. And I feel like this is, one, beautifully honest, and two, something that folks are dealing with right now, which is we have a lot of processes and we have things that need to be done in maybe a certain order or get these certain approvals. And how are we able to quickly turn around and create change, create product change? And really, it drives back to where are we investing when there's less to invest with? And I think that to successfully navigate this macroeconomic landscape, respondents are really making those forward-looking investments in areas that they know will yield higher returns, being product. And you're going to see them cutting back on higher cost areas like sales or marketing. Their top priorities you see here: customer retention, product engagement, and product-led growth. So I'm interested to hear from this group if we feel like this is where your companies are investing as well. And actually, a growth director at a B2B company agreed with us and said, PLG is a fantastic way to acquire users at little to no acquisition cost. But if one gets it right, it helps tremendously to drive value for customers and creates more activation and retention, which I think is something we're all focused on. And respondents are focusing on new products and improved customer experiences to set themselves apart. So you'll see here some of the ways that they're investing in both general competitive differentiation, but also new product launches and the overall digital customer experience, all super important. One product manager told us, digital experience is most critical for us. We've seen a significant acceleration in the shift in that direction due to COVID, and that focus continues to be a differentiator for us and will support retention goals as well. So I think folks do have an understanding of where to invest, and it's just a matter of being able to align resources and be able to really pitch to the overall company leadership that this is where we need to be directionally in the new year. And really that organization, that product manager talking about digital experiences is not a sole person. Most people are saying that they're doubling down on customer experiences by adding value and removing friction, which we'll hear a little bit about in a second. So I think with so much unknown, there are places where people can understand, okay, I'm hearing from my customers or I'm seeing in my data that these three things are most pressing in terms of ways to either remove friction or add value, and they're acting on that, which is really great to see. And speaking of acting on that, so these were some of the companies that we mentioned earlier in the next hottest products, and clearly they are doing something right. And so when we think about each of these next hottest products from the year, we really can learn a lot on their strategies. So they are obviously specific to these organizations, but it's definitely something that we potentially take away. So One is with tickets, it's all about seamless integration. So that team knows that finding integration opportunities improves the overall usability of their platform. A pitch, it's all about PLG. So they have built the buyer's journey directly into their product, unlocking major growth. So a couple of things that they're doing when we talk about friction and value is they're giving access to key features from the beginning, adding value, and they're helping users get up to speed quickly, removing friction so that they can go from an initial, I wonder what pitch is, to action, all without having pitch be heavily involved and a little bit disruptive to their own learning. And then similarly at Loco, again, we're talking about improved user onboarding, and they've already seen some pretty impressive results. So they transformed the way that their customers are onboarded, and those changes have already resulted in a 12.5 improvement in conversion rates. So definitely something that they will continue to double down on. So we love hearing from our customers. We love hearing from our surveys. We also love hearing from all of you. This is just a snapshot of some of the leaders who have read the report, have added their own ideas, their own findings. Here's why I think that this is the hot market right now, reacting to the customers. It's actually really exciting. And we really engage back with folks too, because this helps us for future to understand what is the most interesting part of these reports and what can people learn more. And so you'll see here, folks kind of took it in different directions, whether that was being proud that they were included, like the head of engineering at Found, or Shivy showing some of the insights that she found from the report. So again, just a brief snapshot of some great social media engagement. And if you haven't already downloaded the report, I hope that this so far has piqued your interest and you download after the session. But before I go and bring it out to some questions, just want to talk about some key takeaways. So the first is probably unsurprising, right? Digital product usage is steadily increasing. Now, I say not surprising because we've just talked about it a lot, but for folks who are maybe only looking at headlines or economic factors, maybe this is a bit surprising. And I think that what that means, a couple things there. So one, it's a good thing for everyone who has a digital product in the market. It also means that there's a lot of competition and there's a lot that teams can do to rise above the noise and really capture their markets. So when we think about things like customer experience, it really kind of leads us to our second key takeaway. These next hottest products have been creating incredible customer experiences. And that and product differentiation are really the ways to leverage this time to get far ahead of your competition and stay far ahead. And then lastly, on product-led growth, clearly this is an increasing area of focus for companies. You saw it in the report today. You saw a lot of it on those social media screen grabs on the slide before this. It's something that many teams have been doing this for a long time. And a lot of organizations are understanding that now is a really good time to start leveraging that. So with that, I will bring us back to this page here. This is our link. If you haven't already downloaded the report, I am going to drop it into the chat as well for ease of access. And really with that, if folks have any questions, I would say a couple things. This report is not, or this presentation today, certainly not exhaustive. There are other industries there. There are deeper dives on every single next hottest product. So you can really get a feel for not just what the company does, but why they're winning and why they're winning the battle of user growth and retention. And there's a lot of other insights and exclusive data around some of these trends and things that drive it. So I really do encourage you all to check it out, to download. But for now, I am happy to take any questions. Thank you all again for your time. I have been a part of this report for many months, and every time I read it, I still find something new that I learn and really attach myself to. So I hope that everyone has taken away some good insights you can bring to your teams. And again, just encourage everyone to review the report. So I will stop there. And if anyone has questions, I am happy to answer them.
Thank you, Grace. Actually, I had kind of a question. So As you did mention, you've been looking and working with this report for forever. And obviously there's always like new input to consider. There's never enough data, all these things. But seeing the whole AI incorporation that has been going on these last few months with chat GPT and things like
Yep.
this, how do you think this is gonna influence towards next year's report?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting one, and it's actually going to be an interesting one for us. I would say my initial response is that I do expect an uptick in those tools specifically, and I think, you know, it'll be an interesting one for us when we think about those types of products and really the larger industry. You know, is it SaaS? Is it consumer tech? They have different applications. I think for right now, as with ChatGPT and some of these other ones, we're seeing a lot of it is SaaS related, and it probably fits under that bucket. But I do think that those AI powered tools you saw with Motion is an AI powered scheduler, and so it's definitely a driving force behind a lot of the existing products that are already on our list. However, I expect to see a lot more of them, specifically in the next hottest products list, whether that, you know, AI powered, really anything, but specifically to the chat GPT and other things like that. I think that will very likely contribute to a more sustained and long-term growth in SaaS, slightly different than what we saw last year with some of the ups and downs. But again, that category has historically been really impacted by market changes, by events in different regions. So that one's a fun one to watch, but I do think that GPT or chat GPT rather, and similar products will contribute to that continued increase for sure.
Thanks. If anyone has any other question, feel free to just jump into the conversation, or if you cannot, just write it down in the chat and we will read it out loud for you. Everyone is probably downloading the report.
I hope so. Well, if anyone does have questions after the fact, I am happy to answer them. I can drop my email in here, but otherwise, thank you all for your time and your attention. This is one of my favorite things that we do at Amplitude each year. I'm excited. I think that there's already been a ton of world, either macro or micro events that will be really interesting next year when we're pulling the data. So I hope that I can join you all again next year. I hope that you all join us. And I'm really excited to see what next year brings. But for now, like I said, please download the report. It's got a lot of good stuff in there, stuff that I just simply didn't have time to cover today. But I think that it's really at a minimum interesting, and more so, I think that there's a lot of insights in there that may be helpful for you and your teams. So thank you all again.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, then I would say we can finish today's webinar. Thank you so much, Grace. It was
awesome.
A lot of fun. It always brings a lot of extra questions that I'm sure are inside the report. So hopefully talk to you soon, and we will all be looking forward to next year's report.
Awesome.
And thank you everybody for being here, and again, hopefully see you in our next webinar.
Sounds good. Thanks everyone. Have a good one.
Have a good day. Bye.